What stories do you think in the climate change space resonate the most with local community?
Again, ask yourself what is in it for someone who's like most affected. What they'll care about is their food. Do I have food to feed myself and my family? Do I have money, for example? I'm not going to go to a farmer deep down in Masaka and tell them about global emissions. They don't really care. What they do care about is, I planted my maize last season. Am I going to be able to have a good harvest?
Yes.
So as a journalist, when you go to these conferences, for example, pick out this data and break it down for the common man in Masaka. How does it relate to them? I'll give you an example of what happened at COP30.
Yes.
They launched the TFF, the Tropical Rainforest. It's like a fund that is going to protect rainforests. People or communities are going to be given money to protect tropical rainforests. This is just a trend to try and cut down deforestation.
Hello everyone, it's yet another exciting episode of Driving Eco-Sustainability, My Perspective, and today I'm pleased to be joined by a guest. We are going to be delving into just the dynamics of climate reporting. His name is Jonah Chibo. Jonah is a social entrepreneur and climate justice activist with more than 4 years of experience in both grassroots organizing and UNFCCC processes. He has founded Opportunity Tracker, a one-stop digital platform for tracking local and international opportunities from anywhere around the world and bringing them to the fingertips of young people who need them the most. This platform helps to curate thousands of global opportunities for youth mobility and career development in real time. It's fast-paced and in a clean web manner. And he's also the team lead at Green Futures Initiative, a Ugandan network of environmentalists inspiring young people to care for the environment. Welcome, Jonah.
Thank you for having me, Grace.
Yes. So from what I've picked, at least from your introduction, you are more or less someone who is quite passionate about covering climate stories. But at the same time, you're interested in ensuring that also other young people have access to opportunities that help them to break through and make impact within the climate change space. So I just want you to share with me, how has been your experience thus far in climate reporting?
Well, thank you for having me on this show, first of all, on this podcast. Climate reporting, like we know it, I started back in 2019.
Yes.
And this is a topic that felt very dear to me because I realized that climate change for years has been happening all around us. But when you go back to our school curriculums, when you go to the media, it's not really communicated in a way that to make it resonate with young people who are actually going to be the most affected by it. So for me, when we talk about climate reporting, it's not about spreading the doom about the climate crisis,
Yes.
but it's also about sharing the positive stories, creating awareness, and also helping young people realize that this can actually be something that you can work on. It can be a career path for you. Our curriculum doesn't prepare us for that. And I believe storytelling is going to be really, really very important if you're going to change the narrative from seeing the climate crisis as doom and something that we should run away from to something which we actually embrace and try to tackle together. So that's why climate reporting for me is like very, very, very important.
Yes, so I'm actually very happy that you have highlighted a very key issue, which is the need to stop spelling doom and to also highlight opportunities and solutions that can be implemented by people while reporting about climate change. So share with me, how in your day-to-day reporting, how are you able to balance the need to highlight solutions and hope for a better tomorrow, but also not neglecting the realities of the negative impacts of climate change?
Yeah, good question. I don't know if you've intersected with the word solutions journalism. And for me, when you go out in the field to tell a climate story, you first have to ask yourself, am I creating fear or am I creating hope? I think right now we do have a lot of fear going around, rumors of wars, climate change, eroding cultures, eroding families, taking away lives. But at the end of the day, you have to realize that such news going to make, especially the young generation that have a lot of distractions, they are going to feel powerless. So in your storytelling, do you wish to leave people feeling powerless or more powerful and actually realizing that they have power within themselves to act on climate change, for example? Yes, the climate change is happening. With even, for example, in Uganda, you see stories from Kasese, stories even here in Kampala. But again, there are already young people in these communities that are doing something about this. There are already people who can be framed as heroes, as people who are doing something to inspire someone else to actually realize that, oh, I can also do something about this crisis. And for me, that's what, for example, solutions journalism is all about, and what climate reporting should try to highlight.
Okay. So any particular techniques that you've been able to employ to ensure that it's specifically solution-based and not entirely focusing on the negative impacts and the doom and the destruction of property caused by climate change disasters?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. We do. The good thing about our generation is that we do have a lot of information around us. We do have this. We do have statistics. We do have, right now, we do have, for example, AI systems as well that someone can use to compute the data. And for example, one of the stories that I told and resonated very much with me, a story in Kasese. I don't know if you remember in 2020 when River Nyamwamba burst its banks.
Yes.
Yes, and communities there in Kasese were left displaced. Over 2,000 families. Right now, they are still living in a camp, actually. But when I visited this camp back in 2022, I saw women, for example, that are trying to restore their life using the little resources that the government and other NGOs and community groups have helped them with. And my story when I was at this camp was not to actually tell people how climate change is affecting these people, but it was to highlight the stories and resilience of people in these communities. I remember I worked with a young activist from Uganda called Crispus Mwimaho, who's doing very brilliant work in Kasese right now. And they are trying to get these women, for example, because they lost their land, they lost everything that they own. Their children cannot go to school. But Crispus and other young people in this community, they have actually set up an education center where young people who cannot go to school because their parents cannot afford school fees anymore can go to study. And these are stories of change. These are stories of power. The women lost their land, but these community groups are trying to get land for them to rent out land so that they can grow crops, so that they can feed their families, but also sell the surplus, and that's income to these families. So for me, when we talk about climate crisis, for example, stories like this would inspire someone like me, someone like you to say, oh, they are already young people who are actually trying to create hope in these communities. So how do we help them? How do we empower them? Do we feed them more doom that you can't do anything, or do we give them more power that you can actually do something about, for example, a situation like this? So if someone reads a story like this and you are, for example, in Mbale and something happens, you're going to be inspired to know that in Kasese, when something happened, there is a young community, a young boy or a young activist who did something, and I can also actually do something like that in my community. So for me, this is what climate, for example, these are the tools that I've been using to make sure that if I'm in a community, I try to look out for the positive stories. It's not just being delusional or creating optimism, but it's actually creating hope that is visible and factual, and that can be backed up by real action.
Yes. So now I'm happy that you mentioned that point where, like, as climate storytelling, the art of climate storytelling and covering of stories can actually have a scalable impact in not only the community, one community, but a story of change in one community can be a source of inspiration in another community. But you also hinted on something to do with AI, and I wanted to find out from you, do you think AI is actually going to simplify the coverage of climate stories and the art of making climate change stories relatable and more hopeful for local communities?
Well, Yes, because first of all, we have to accept that AI is here. It's not going away. And it's going to be upon us how we see it. Is it like an enemy, or is it something that we can work with to actually create more impact? AI can be used, for example, to visualize stories in communities.
Yes.
It can be used to analyze data in communities. And as a journalist, as a climate reporter, as someone who's trying to create hope, these are very important tools for you to see the trend, for example, to see, are things getting better, are things getting worse, and if they're getting worse, what else can we do? If they are getting better, what can we learn from that? And this is where, for example, AI tools come in from. I've seen young people even here in Uganda doing very important work using AI, for example. The maps, we can see the trends of, for example, deforestation.
Yes.
How is it going? Is there hope? For example, we have a lot of companies that have all these campaigns of tree planting and sustainability campaigns. What AI can do is to show us the truth that these companies actually, for example, planting the trees. If they are planting the trees, are these trees growing? Can we analyze that data and see that it's actually progress? And there is something we can, for example, use as an example for other communities, or is it all greenwashing, that these are projects that come in like 2 months, 3 months, and they can't be traced anymore? So for me, I believe that AI is going to be very important, especially for journalists in this era.
Yes. Now, about greenwashing, journalists are, in modern times, journalists, because we have access to internet, we have access to all other sources of information here and there. We are in an information era. Journalists are a powerful voice, and they actually influence the narrative and influence decisions being taken by people in local communities and even us people in our day-to-day lives. So you will understand that if a journalist covers a positive solution that they have found being implemented in a community to deal with climate change, it may be traditional knowledge or an environmental disaster, like let's say nature-based solutions which are implemented by communities to adapt or mitigate climate change. When a journalist shares such a story on their platform or in the media, it's very probable and expected that people are going to view it in a positive way and take it that it's a solution they should actually also pioneer in their communities. So, but usually we can't guard against some of the falsehoods that may come from the story, especially when someone shares that this is positively impacting the community. There could be a possibility that it's actually also harming our community. So how do journalists balance and create safeguards against sharing stories that may actually be advancing greenwashing, but at the same time they need to share these solutions with everyone out there who is interested in adapting to and mitigating climate change?
Okay, so first of all, as a journalist, one of the things that you learn in journalism school is you have to get your facts right.
Yes.
And you should be able to spot greenwashing from real sustainability impact.
Yes.
For example, if a campaign comes to you or a brand comes to you and they have this amazing campaign, as a journalist, your first role is not to highlight them, but to find out the fact, are they really doing what they are saying they are doing? Or is this just another campaign like we have many with airlines for right now, for example, saying that they are, if an airline, for example, came to you and they say you have this offsetting carbon campaign and this is what we do about sustainability. So as a journalist, you're going to, first of all, first track this campaign. Is its benefits really trickling down to the ground, or is it just something that they want to put in their reports and share with their investors and partners? So as when you have your facts right as a journalist, then you can move forward to the next step of telling this story. And your role again as a journalist is not to actually deny that climate change is happening, or is not to share delusional hope, like I mentioned earlier, but recognize that it's happening and there are figures to back it up, but also now try to shift the narrative, because we are in 2026. I mean, climate change has been happening since before we are even born. So this is a story that has been told through centuries and ages. So as a journalist, you are not going to deny that in just one story. You're going to realize that it's happening and it's impacting, especially Africa, for example, which is one of the most affected continents by this crisis. But also, I think it's now is the time to move the needle and realize that Africa is not just being affected, but we have builders, we have young people who are actually having real solutions on the ground, real products, real innovations to address this crisis and also inspire other young people and other communities. So I think the onus is more on the journalists in this era, especially with a lot of greenwashing campaigns, a lot of AI that can be used to misrepresent facts. So it's going to be going back to the basics of journalism. Have the facts right, understand the story you're telling it before you even share it with on your platforms, for example, because journalists should be the guardians of truth. So if we can't trust the journalists in this era, then it's going to be very difficult. But I think the responsibility is more on the journalists now to make sure that they have the rights right and they are actually presenting the right fact in their stories.
Yes. So I think presenting the right facts and creating credibility for a journalist would lead to more of also understanding your audience. Mm-hmm. So as a journalist who has been around for quite some time, what, in your view, what stories do you think in the climate change space resonate the most with local communities? Because it would be our listener out there who would be venturing into climate storytelling or reporting would want to understand where is that area that they could tap in the most, that they know they are not going to just share a story, but this story is going to move a community to act and take action.
Well, thank you. As a journalist, for example, I've seen lots of journalists wanting to go to these conferences, climate conferences, and cover the COPs,
yes,
the climate summits that happen regionally, even here in Uganda.
Yes.
But if I'm a farmer down in PGO Masaka, I don't really want to know what's happening at COP because I don't even know what's happening.
Yes.
So for you as a journalist, when you go to these conferences, for example, you should again ask yourself what is in it for someone who's like most affected. For people on the front line, what do they care about right now? What they'll care about is their food. Do I have food to feed myself and my family? Do I have money, for example? I'm not going to go to a farmer deep down in Masaka and tell them about global emissions. They don't really care. What they do care about is, I planted my maize last season. Am I going to be able to have a good harvest?
Yes.
So as a journalist, when you go to these conferences, for example, pick out this data and break it down for the common man down in Masaka. How does it relate to them? I'll give you an example. What happened at COP30?
Yes.
They launched the TFF, the Tropical Rainforest. It's like a fund that is going to protect rainforests. And what basically is in this fund is that people or communities are going to be given money to protect tropical rainforests. This is just a trend to try and cut down deforestation. So as a journalist, when you go and hear about this fund, can you tell a story and tell this farmer down there who has trees that, do you know that if you don't cut down these trees in this and this period, you could be able to tap into this fund and get resources for actually protecting this forest? So I think that would be something a farmer would be interested in, that, oh, you mean if I don't pull down this forest, I can actually have some money in the next 2-3 years? That's a story that's going to resonate with this farmer, for example. If we talk about the loss and damage fund and money that is coming, how can we make sure that these people actually can interpret that, for example, if we face the flood or anything last year, do we know the right channels to go to claim maybe a share of this fund or to share our voices? And as a journalist, you have to be able to make these stories resonate with the people, and that's going to be taking you to remove, because when you go to the UN conferences or these summits, for example, they like speaking in data, they like speaking in numbers. But can you put a face to the numbers? If they say, if, for example, you're reporting about a flood in Imbala, instead of saying 50 people died in this flood, can you name them? Can you show their faces? Can you also show, for example, how people are responding to this flood that happened? Someone in another community, if they face a flood, you could pick inspiration from that instead of showing them data that 50 died or 50 families were evacuated and all that. Can you put faces? First of all, can you put faces? Can you break down the data that is being shared in these conferences to show how it affects the common man deep down in Masaka? But also, no, it's not just the farmers, it's also about the youth, the young people. Yes. If you're a climate activist right now in this generation and you care about climate, and you know that, for example, the TFF, something like that was launched at COP30, you as an activist, how can you actually tap into that to try and understand it, to try and see how this, to try and track this money, how is it going to move from the climate space to the governments, down to the local communities. And as an activist, your role will be to see, are the communities really benefiting from these funds, or is it being held up somewhere, so in the government or in the ministries? And how can you use your voice and platform as a journalist and as an activist, for example, to make sure that the ministries are accountable and make sure that they release these funds to the people who need them most? So for me, that would be the role of a journalist, for example.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for watching the video this far. If you have made it to this point, then it means that you are intrigued and interested in saving the environment and protecting the planet. If you want to bring this conversation to more people, you can hit the subscribe button so that we can reach further and wider. Thank you so much. So our viewers out here, if you don't know, for those who are not aware of what COP is an annual climate change conference where countries and parties to the Paris Agreement meet annually to discuss and deliberate on how to respond to, tackle, adapt, and mitigate climate change. And which other term did you mention that was complicated? Oh, loss and damage. That one I'll leave it. You can share with our viewers, those who don't know what loss and damage is, because you also hinted on it. What's loss and damage in simplified terms?
Well, when we talk about loss and damage, when climate events happen, for example, if there is a flood, loss can be determined as those things that cannot be brought back. For example, human life.
Yes.
If a flood happened today and 50 people died, that's loss. But if we talk about damage, if a building is destroyed, for example, that's damage.
Yes.
Because it can now still be worked upon and goes back to its normal or earlier state. So the term loss and damage was coined by mostly civil society and countries in the global south to try and see that if climate change effects happen in the communities, can we compute these figures? Can we say that can we put the damage and losses into money or into financial figures to know that this community lost property worth maybe 50 billion or 50 millions, and how can they be paid? How can they seek justice and make sure that they do get the support that they need, especially from countries in the global north that are more responsible for the crisis? So basically, that's what it is. It's all about the loss that cannot be brought back and the damage that can actually be brought back.
Yes.
So it's all about getting this damage and losses and putting them into financial figures and make sure that these communities that are at the front line and facing the effects of climate change can actually regain their life.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now, during all this discussion, I've also picked that effective journalism and climate storytelling involves not only covering the story, but making it relatable. You have to humanize a story. And especially when it comes to climate diplomacy, which most people do not understand. And frankly speaking, most people are not interested in. So I wanted you to share with me how does a climate journalist manage to effectively balance covering these stories, humanizing these stories, but also ensuring that you do not oversimplify to the extent that the meaning is lost in translation?
Well, for me, climate change, when you talk about the climate change or the climate crisis, first of all, it's all about the people. So
yes.
People have to be at the front line of everything that we do. Instead of focusing on statistics, let's focus on people who are actually being affected or who are doing something on the crisis. But also, after understanding that, you should understand that this is a real topic with human life at stake. So oversimplifying it and especially trivializing it, I know that we, especially Ugandans, we do love to trivialize issues a lot. But as a journalist, again, your role is to show that behind this crisis, behind these events that we are saying, there are actually real human lives that are being impacted. There is a farmer who cannot send his or her children to school because because they lost all their harvest and they don't have any money, they don't have any stock to take to the market. There is a child who can no longer go to school because his father cannot afford to take them to school anymore. There is a young girl who's being wedded off before the age of 18 because the family needs money to survive. And there are families that have lost their cultures and lost everything that they knew because of this crisis. So as a journalist, then, as when you're telling this story, you have to have the empathy, for example. You have to know that there is real humanity and people behind this crisis and these issues. And as long as you do have that empathy within you to make sure that you don't strip these people of their dignity that is remaining, or whatever that is remaining of their lifestyles, I think that's like the foundation of everything else. Then you cannot try to trivialize such an issue.
Yes. Now, in this information age, as we usually say, we are also currently facing an issue of misinformation. And misinformation is one of the leading causes of panic, fear, and instigating a lot of uncertainty. So how would a journalist safeguard against this, or someone in the space of climate storytelling? Because I'll give an example. Around the election season, there was information going around that please buy units. Otherwise, by this time, on this date, you will not be able to buy units. So meaning you will not be able to access electricity. Now, it turns out that along the way, people actually there was a rush of buying units. But along the way, we later discovered that actually mobile money was going to continue working so that those who wanted to buy units to access electricity could during the election season. So when we see that information that's not credible usually ends up creating a lot of uncertainty and instilling fear among people. And we do realize that climate change, the backdrop of climate change is man-made and unforeseen disasters. So how do we guard against misinformation in that regard?
That's going to be very difficult, especially in this era of everything that we've mentioned before.
Yes.
But then it's all about taking personal responsibility, first of all, not just journalists, but to everyone who cares about how they represent or misrepresent facts out there. For example, before you share anything, if you receive something, first of all, the onus is about you to stop the spread. If I received a news story right now on my phone, I'm going to first try to understand what's the source of this news. If it's coming from a verifiable source, we all know the major news platforms, for example. If I can trace it back to major news platform, then I can maybe trust it that, for example, this media channel, this platform shared it. But if I cannot verify this source, if you're a journalist, then if this story is talking about a certain ministry, for example, or a certain individual, as a journalist, first ask yourself, is this true? And if so, if it's stressing to an individual that you can reach out to, try to call them, for example. This is like common practice in the newsrooms. You just call this person and say, hey, I've received this story on my phone, blah, blah, blah. It says 1, 2, 3. Is it true? Is it correct? And if this person that is being talked about in this story, for example, says that's true, then you can actually go ahead and quote them and say, yeah, this is a true story. But if they deny it as a journalist, of course, you don't share it any further. And if it's already trending out there, you can just put out a statement and say, this story is not true. I've called this person and they've denied it. If you can't trace it to a major news source, for example, again, don't spread what you yourself cannot trust, for example. go back and see if, for example, if it's a small news platform or some individual, go to a major news source and find out, are they saying anything about it? If it's a story worth telling, you are going to be very sure that at least one or two other media houses have a copy and they've just put it out there. And if they don't, then you know that, okay, maybe it's not true. Then you go deeper on the second layer of understanding, of again, trying to understand where is it coming from and why is it being spread.
Yes.
So before you share any fact, first of all, fact check to know that, is it true? Is it can I verify it? If I share this thing and they ask me, where did you get it? Can I actually mention this source, for example? Yeah.
Yes. So now, amidst all this, we seem to always never think about the journalist or the storyteller and the impact of what they are sharing on their personal lives or their mental health. So how best do you think a journalist or one can guard against the negative effect of what they are covering so that it doesn't end up overwhelming them? Because these days, fatigue and mental health challenges by journalists and storytellers cannot be ignored.
Well, yeah, a lot is going on in the world right now, and you can't really blame anyone to be burnt out at this age.
Yes.
So in this period, this country itself, we just come out of elections. We have a lot of wars and going on around the world, in the Middle East, in Europe. And of course, the current rise of fascism, for example, especially in North America, where we are also seeing a shift now in funding sources or in attention. The period between 2019 and 2023, 2024, for example, has had climate stories take up an important role in the global media space. But right now, the focus is shifting to something else. And as a journalist, of course, all these things can add up to the stress and how you end up, for example, representing yourself or the stories that you tell out there. So it's also very important for journalists, for example, to prioritize rest, because we like many organizations will tell you that rest is something you have to earn, but I do believe rest, you don't have to earn rest. You just have to rest. If you cannot go any further, it's okay to rest and take that pause, because if you burn out, life will still continue without you. So first, make yourself the main priority and make sure that you are in the right mental space to be able to deliver your work, for example. And so for me, rest is very important. And another thing, for example, would be community. Right now, make sure that you have a community of people you can reach out to, you can talk to. Activists, for example, are very good at that. When you go to climate summits or when you go to activist communities, you realize that many of them prioritize that rest because they know how strenuous the work they do is. And it's very simple, for example, to point fingers, but can you look within yourself and say, am I feeling okay? Am I enjoying what I'm doing? Because I believe if you're in the right mental space, then you're also going to enjoy the work that you're doing. So rest, community, have people you can share with, have a community. For example, if you're a journalist, you can join journalist communities and talk to each other and see how we can navigate the challenges we're facing right now, especially with limited funding and all those other restrictions that are coming to climate reporting, especially, and anything to do with climate in this era. So the top two things for me would be rest, prioritize community, and also, just take care of yourself, exercise, and do anything that relaxes your mind, really. Mental health is a really very important aspect of who we are as human beings. Yeah.
Yes. So, favorite story you've covered offhead?
Favorite story I've covered
offhead? Most memorable that you look back to and you're proud of what you were able to achieve and the whole experience of covering it.
Yeah, again, it will be the story that I've already mentioned in Kasese, where really young activists from Uganda are doing very important work. I've been there, and I've traced this story from the day we told it in 2022 up to now. I've kept in touch, for example, with some of these young people with Crispus, and he continues to support this community in Kasese, and it's very encouraging to see that we actually have young people in Uganda who are doing such work in our communities, because since 2020, when this community lost its livelihood, they've been gazetted into a camp, and it's been almost 4 years right now. They are being told they'll be taken somewhere else, but it's really not coming through. And seeing young people, young activists, Ugandan young activists doing the job that they are doing in these communities, making sure that the young children in these communities can still go to school. Of course, it cannot equal to what they had before, but it's something to make sure they're not left behind. Education is something very important, and we can't even talk about the climate crisis, for example, without talking about how important education is. Because at the end of the day, these are the future leaders of the future that we are fighting for. And if they are not empowered to make sure that they can sit somewhere in this future, then we are not helping them, even if we address the climate crisis right now. So it's really very good. So thank you, CRISPR, for making sure that these young people can still access education, to make sure that the women, especially in these communities, because when such crises happen, actually, something that is funny is that the men, when you reach to these communities, you find that some men are almost invisible, because when such disaster happens, men just leave to go and do something else, and realize that women are taking control of the families by growing food. And these communities, especially, I saw one community group that we worked with on this story, the Abayuti Youth Climate Network, that is renting out land nearby so that these women can actually go to these farms and grow crops and feed their families and also sell the surplus. But they're also training their girls in these communities how to do a lot of craft work. And it was really a very important story. And I'm very glad that after, for example, our story and the highlight we created on this work that they are doing, this community was able to win a grant to actually put more into the work that they're already doing. So I was very happy when they reached out to me and said that, hey, because of your story, we're able to get a grant, and now we can do even more work to these communities. So yeah, that's a really, really interesting story that I continue to follow up even today.
Yes. So do you think climate storytelling and reporting has finally achieved its recognition in the space of shaping the climate change narrative and understanding by local communities about the grave impact of climate change, and not only the grave impact, but also opportunities that they can exploit to ensure that their livelihoods improve, but at the same time, they are able to adapt to this crisis?
Yes, I believe so. We've had lots of stories that have covered or that have brought to the front seat the topic of climate change. Like I mentioned when we started, for most people, especially in Uganda, climate change is not something that we'd learn about in schools. When you go to school, climate change is always talked about as something that will happen somewhere in the 3000s or
yes,
yeah, but it's already happening. And what climate reporting and storytelling has done is to actually show these people that it's happening right now and it's here, and it's affecting communities, it's affecting real people, but also it has done a good job in showing that there are already young people who look like you, people who grew up in the same communities like you, who are already doing something about climate change. And these are people who have went ahead to inspire so many other activists, other innovators. I can give you, for example, a story of an activist here we have here in Uganda, Vanessa Nakate, who's a very good activist. Yes, and yeah, she's someone who's went ahead and inspired many young people across. But when you look back to Vanessa, for example, how the media has presented Vanessa here in Uganda and away from Uganda, it has been able to put the torch on people who are doing something on climate, and this has inspired other people to follow people like Vanessa and to see what they can do in this climate space. So for me, I believe it has been very important. But also it has been very important in making sure that our leaders, for example, are being held accountable on the decisions or the announcements they make when they go, for example, to these conferences and come back here and say, we are going to invest in green energy. I've seen journalists follow up, going to the ministry and say that at the COP, this is what you say, what is the government doing right now? So it's really helping, and it's done a very good job in making sure that climate takes a front seat. Although the narrative is shifting a bit, but it has put like the climate debate up there among the things that Ugandans should now focus on, instead of just focusing on everything else and ignoring climate.
Yes. Now, a young journalist out there, or someone who is passionate about climate change, and they feel that they should start using their social media platforms or to highlight it and also to share solutions. Now, as an opportunities curator, where would you direct them to start from?
Well, that's very good. Thank you. I'll take you back for when I started as a, because I didn't start my career as a climate journalist.
Yes.
I was just someone who enjoyed telling stories and who enjoyed working in the media. And when I was working with this media house, I started to see the climate space gathering pace around 2018, 2019. And I was very interested in the climate topic, in climate as a topic. And I was really, really inspired by the young people who are already taking action in this space. So this drove me to actually go deeper into this topic and first of all, understand it for myself. And then when I realized that it's actually something that is very close to me, my parents are farmers, for example, I'm like, okay, this is something I enjoy telling. But then after years of covering it, I realized that there are very many opportunities for young people as well. And as a young person who's, for example, fresh from university and you want to do something in climate, you don't have to have a background of climate change. You don't have to have done an environment degree. You could have done business. You could have done logistics. You could have done health. Climate change is something that intersects with a lot of things. For example, we have health activists in the climate space because climate change affects health.
Yes.
Climate change affects education. Climate change affects business. Climate change affects aviation. So as a young person, first of all, I would say, you'll need to invest in yourself.
Yes.
Seek knowledge in your area. If you are into health, see how climate change intersects with health, and first understand that. When you do understand that, you'll personally be convinced to do something that already resonates with what you are doing. If you're a storyteller, for example, climate change intersects with storytelling. Once you know what you want to do in this sector, once you know that, for me, I believe I'm an entrepreneur. We have young people. I mean, Uganda is always talked about as one of those very entrepreneurial countries. So as young people, you have a business. Before you set up that business, first understand how can I actually frame it in a way that is sustainable, in a way that, for example, the products I'm going to use are sustainably sourced. And when you first understand that and implement it at a personal level, then you can go online and see opportunities that are in that line. I'm running Opportunity Tracker, which is like a platform for young people to benefit from both local and global opportunities. Our website is www.opportunitytracker.ug. You can just log onto this platform and say, I'm a young person, I'm doing health. You are going to find fellowships, for example, that are even willing to fund you to go and train you further in how to be a good health advocate, for example. If you're an entrepreneur, you're going to see companies that are actually putting up funds. They're literally begging young people to come and take this money, to say that if you're doing something that is related to this, we are able to fund you as long as you can present to us why you are doing this and the impact you're already having or you hope to create on the ground. We have summits every year that happen. Just this month, I can mention like 4 or 5 summits that are happening globally. And these are summits that are fully funded. You can just put in your application, show these people what you're already doing or what you hope to do after coming back from this summit. They're happy to fund you to go out there and connect with like-minded individuals or people who are already doing the work that you hope to do or that you are doing. But also look out for people who are already doing what you're doing. If you're an activist starting out, you have amazing network of activists here in Uganda that you can follow and see what the work they are doing, see how you can reach out to them and join the campaigns or the work that they're already doing, or maybe learn something from them and see how you can work on your own project from the inspiration that they are creating already. So to summarize that, just first of all, do the work within yourself, understand your interest. For example, understand how it relates to climate, how or any of the development sectors that you can relate to your idea. If it's entrepreneurship, if it's health, if you're a journalist, for example, if you're into business, if into marketing, for example, how can I relate the topic or what I'm already doing to climate? But after relating to it, where can I find resources? I've already mentioned the platform opportunity tracker where we do share these opportunities, for example, but also reach out to people who are already doing this work. Myself, Jonah Chibo, I'm on all social media platforms as well. You can personally reach out to me and I'll be happy to direct you where to look or to give you hints of for example, who you can reach out to. And yeah, that's basically how everyone starts. No one starts at the top. We all start at the bottom, and it's platforms like these, resources and people that help us to progress. Yeah.
Yes. So our viewers out there, the starting point is that you can go online today in Google and type in www.opportunitytracker, and you are going to find a lot of amazing opportunities. But it's also important to understand what area of climate change you would like to advance and to concentrate on to do your work, because as you are aware, climate change affects diverse areas of our lives. And you pick one, you champion it, you start today, and tomorrow you never know, you may be the leading voice in this space. So Chibo, some of the emerging technologies that you are aware that are going to simplify and shape how climate storytelling and reporting is going to go on today and in the future?
The emerging technologies, we've already mentioned, for example, AI. This can be...
Anyway, those that you're using or any that you've been able to work on, or platforms or tools that are quite making your work easy, and you're sure they are going to be able to make other people's work easier in future in terms of effective climate storytelling and coverage and reporting.
Yeah, for me, the biggest is AI. I will not mention any platforms in particular, but like AI right now can be used, for example, to refine your idea. Like I said, we are going to have to adapt to use AI as a colleague. We don't have to give up our humanity and empathy, which AI doesn't have. But as a journalist in this generation and era, you're going to, if you have an idea, for example, I mean, Google has a lot of resources itself. They've just launched the Google Gemini, for example, which is a very important tool that you can just go on this platform and put in your idea and see what is happening elsewhere around this idea that you have. Maybe it's a story, how are other countries, how are other communities telling these stories, for example. And this can shape, for example, you as a journalist, how you present your story or your facts. But also we have activist communities. These are very important communities to tap into as a journalist, and civil society communities to see what is civil society up to, because these are the people who are trying to shift the needle, who are like in this ecosystem that we're in of climate storytelling. What are they talking about? What's the trending topic right now among activists, among civil society, among governments, for example? We have the US withdrawing from a lot of international communities and groups. Yes. So as a journalist, how do you try to see the effect this is having on these communities, on these groups, for example? And if you're able to relate and join these communities, you could have an idea of how to shape your next story or how to tell better stories as a journalist.
Yes. So yes, thank you so much. It's been great having you. And yes, our viewers out there, solution-based climate storytelling is the present and the future. And this has been a personal topic to me because I'm quite big about championing the opportunities that can be exploited in the current climate change crisis, other than focusing on the doom and negative impact of climate change. Driving eco-sustainability, my perspective. I've been your host, Grace. Till next time.